The firelight cast a fragile shadow of Selina upon the curtain. The black woman Dust Creek had shunned for barrenness, now sheltered by Grant Holloway, a widower hidden away in his mountain cabin. He sat still, his gaze fixed on that faint outline. His rough voice broke the silence like confession. "If I wished to be closer, would you allow it?" After a pause, the shadow bowed, trembling, yet unwilling to turn away. Grant drew in a breath, slow and steady, lifting the curtain. Through the mist of steam, Selina stood, eyes wet, for the first time allowing herself to be seen, to be held, and to be called beautiful. The hammer struck wood with the finality of an axe, sharp and merciless. Dust Creek's square fell into a silence so heavy it carried the whistle of wind through the faded flags above. On the wooden steps, Selina Ward stood straight, her thin arms clutching a small cloth sack tight against her chest. Inside lay the sum of her life: a hem-frayed dress, her mother's silver brush, a Bible worn at the spine. All she owned now fit into a trembling bundle. The crowd circled, voiceless but unblinking. Their stares, some with contempt, some with pity, some with smug delight, wove a net that tightened around her body and her breath. Selina caught a whisper. 10 years a wife, and not one child. She is cursed. The words cut dull and jagged, but deep enough to leave her bleeding inside. Her husband, Nathan Vaughn, a wealthy trader of the valley, stood with his arms snug around a young woman's waist, her smile laced with triumph. His voice rose, pitched so every ear in town could hear. "This woman is a curse, barren. There is no place for her in Dust Creek. I will take a new wife to carry the Vaughn name." Each word fell like a sentence passed. Selina longed to speak, to cry out, but her throat locked dry, her heartbeat pounding against the ribs like a drum of doom. For an instant, she felt the ground open beneath her feet, dragging her into endless dark. None stepped forward to shield her. Not friends who once shared her table. Not neighbors she had called kin. Heads bowed, faces turned aside, as if even meeting her eyes might invite misfortune. That silence wounded sharper than accusation. When the judge closed the book, his voice rolled out low and cold, like stone breaking loose in a canyon. 3 days. Leave Dust Creek. Never return. The crowd broke apart, leaving her alone. Wind tore at her thin dress, whipping strands of hair across her cheek. She shut her eyes, clutching the sack harder, fighting the sting of tears. For she knew if one fell, it would drown the last scrap of pride she had left. 3 days later, iron wheels ground over the red dirt road as Selina was driven out. The clank of metal and the strike of hooves cut like knives in her chest. She sat hunched on the bench, her coat too thin for winter's edge. Her chin trembled, lips bitten till blood came, holding back the cry that pressed to break free. Across from her, the old driver peered through clouded eyes lined deep with years. His gaze held no curiosity, only weary knowing. He had seen Dust Creek drive many out, criminals at times, misfits at others. But he looked at Selina longer than most, a flicker of quiet pity kindling in the dim of his eyes. "It's a long road, girl," he muttered, voice rasped with tobacco and time. "Don't expect no one waiting." Selina gave no answer. Her throat was stone. She only bowed her head, fingers gripping the sack strap till her knuckles whitened. Above, the sky grayed heavy, swallowing the sun whole. Even the heavens seemed to seal her exile. Through 10 years of marriage, Selina had dreamed of a child's laughter, a home lit with warmth, Yet each passing month carved another wound. Linens stained red, doctors' probing eyes, the cruel laughter of women cradling their babes in the market. That dream lay shattered, and the whole town turned its back. The wagon jolted to a stop. Horses whinnied, the smell of damp earth and pine filling the air. The driver flicked his whip toward a valley lined with green. There, a cabin of timber stood solid, its chimney spilling a thin plume into the gray sky. "End of the line," he said, his tone rough but not unkind. "Man, there goes by Grant Holloway. Takes in those with no place left. Try your hand if you aim to stay." Selina lifted her head, eyes rimmed red, fixed on the lonely cabin. Each step toward it felt less like a path, more like a sentence served. Yet behind her, the red road was closed for good. The driver climbed down, set her sack gently on the ground. His wrinkled hand brushed hers, warm against the cold. He started to speak, but only sighed. Selina bowed her head, her voice raw. "Thank you." The wagon rolled off, vanishing behind the line of pines. Wheels rattled away until only silence remained. Selina stood still, clutching the bundle to her chest, as though it were the last shard of a life already broken. One step, two. Her boots pressed into wet grass, each stride heavy as stone. Yet the cabin held, smoke rising faint into the dimming sky, and Selina knew, if she stopped here, there would be no other road left to walk. Afternoon light spilled across the stream, gold rippling over the valley. Selina followed a pine-strewn path, her steps heavy with no choice left to take. The murmur of water carried the sharp scent of sap. By the bank stood a man. Broad-backed, tall, shoulders built from a lifetime's work, he cast a long shadow on the ground. Sunlight cut through the branches, touching dark hair streaked with gray and eyes the color of deep earth. He held a bucket, his hands scarred and rough. Selina stopped, her heart quickening. The man nodded, silent. She forced her voice steady. "Do you know where Grant Holloway lives?" He studied her without a word, gaze steady, unreadable. Then he gave a single nod, his answer short, gravel low. "Follow me." He wasted no breath on more. Selina clutched her sack and walked behind him. The path bent through grass, then wound into a thicket where fading sun traced pale lines across damp soil. Leaves whispered under their boots, the silence so thick her every breath felt too loud. He did not look back, did not ask. His steps held the rhythm of a man long familiar with the way. Yet Selina felt her chest ease. At least he had not driven her off, had not looked at her with the scorn she had borne in Dust Creek. His silence, cold as it was, felt kinder. They turned a narrow bend, and the cabin appeared. Modest wood nestled beneath old pines, a thread of smoke rising into the gray. The door was darkened with years, the porch worn smooth. Stacked firewood sat in neat rows, signs of order. The man lifted the latch and, for the first time since they'd met, faced her. His eyes carried neither welcome nor rejection, only acceptance. "Grant Holloway," he said evenly, and held the door wide. "If you've nowhere else, you can rest here." Selina paused, caught by the plain truth in his tone. No pity, no reproach, only fact, as simple as breath. Inside, the glow of an oil lamp softened the edges of carved wood. The room was clean to the bone, a table scrubbed smooth, dishes in place, blankets folded sharp. Yet in a corner lingered traces of another, an embroidered cloth long left to dust, a frame of unfinished stitching. The breath of a woman, gone but not erased. Grant set down the bucket and fed the fire. Flames climbed, warming the cabin. He asked nothing of her, spoke nothing of past. He poured water, placed the cup before her. Sit. Drink. Her hands shook as she obeyed. Heat spread through her chest, easing the chill. She drew in air as if ice within her had begun to thaw. Supper was plain: stew, coarse bread, a bit of pickled root. She had not eaten all day. The smell twisted her stomach tight. Grant wordlessly placed another slice in her bowl. She looked up, caught his dark gaze. He turned away at once, but the moment left a faint warmth behind, a small spark in her night. When darkness settled and wind prowled the eaves, Grant laid a thick quilt on the bed. His voice came low. You'll sleep. Here, I'll take the floor. Selina's breath caught. In 10 years of marriage, no man had yielded her anything. Not in the house she once called her own. Now a stranger, after hours only, gave up his bed and chose the cold boards. She wanted to protest, to offer the floor herself, but his steady eyes left no room. At last she lay upon the mattress, pine and smoke lacing the covers. Grant stretched on the floor, his back turned, breathing even. Selina stared up at the timbered ceiling, something unfamiliar stirring within. For the first time in years, she was not judged, not marked as burden. In the dark, a tear slid warm across her cheek. Not shame's tear, but release. She drew the quilt close, letting the drops fall into the pillow. That night, for the first time in many years, Selina Ward wept not for being cast away, but for being met with respect. The first mornings in the cabin came to Selina like some strange dream. She woke to the smell of strong coffee drifting through the small room, mingled with the resin smoke of burning pine. No more whispers behind her back. No more eyes measuring her worth. Only the crackle of firewood and the tall figure of a man pouring coffee into a chipped porcelain cup. Grant spoke little, but every move carried purpose. He set the cup before her without a word, as though her place at the table had always been certain. Breakfast was plain: black bread, a smear of butter, a slice or two of cured meat. Yet it tasted richer than all the feasts she had once sat through in Dust Creek. In that silence she felt warmth creeping back into her chest. The days moved slow. Selina learned to fetch water from the stream, sweep out dust, slice vegetables. Clumsy at first, she grew steadier with each task. Grant never complained. At times he simply reached out, shifting her hand, his broad fingers brushing hers. In those moments her blood seemed to run quicker, as if she were waking from a long sleep. One afternoon, while the sun slanted gold across the valley, she asked softly, "Is there a place where I might bathe?" Grant lifted his gaze, dark eyes resting on her face longer than usual. Calm, steady, yet enough to bring a flush to her skin. At last he nodded, took up a bucket, and said in his gravel-low voice, "Come." They crossed the woods to a bend in the stream where a great stone shielded the water. Clear currents slid over moss-covered rocks. Grant set the bucket down, his tone even. "You'll bathe here. I'll wait there." He stepped away, leaned against a tree, eyes turned toward the forest. But when Selina waded in, ripples breaking against stone, he glanced back without meaning to. Evening light caught her skin where water gleamed bronze, her wet hair trailing her shoulders, her slight frame shivering against the cold stream. He turned away sharp, pulse pounding sudden and wild. Selina knew she felt no shame, no sting. For once she was not seen with reproach, as when her former husband's eyes had branded her a failure. Here she was looked at, truly looked at, as a woman. In that instant, the weight she had carried for 10 long years slipped, if only a little. When she stepped out, a towel wrapped around her, she glanced at him. Grant kept his back turned, feigning interest in a flock of sparrows flitting branch to branch. But his hand gripped his knee hard, the knuckles white. Selina's lips curved in the faintest smile. That night, firelight danced against cabin walls. Selina ate in silence, yet her thoughts strayed back to the stream, to the way Grant's eyes had flickered and turned. Her heart, long numb, now stirred with unease and wonder. Grant fared no better. He cleared dishes, fed the fire, yet the image haunted him. Her slender form beneath the water, the light burning across her shoulders. He told himself it was no more than a man's natural stirring. Still, his chest thudded restless against the calm he tried to wear. When night came, Selina lay on the bed staring at the rafters, the wind's whistle seeping through the cracks. But it was not the cold that held her wakeful. It was the memory of his hand clenched, his eyes caught and quick averted. She pressed her palm to her chest, feeling her heart race in a way she had not known for years. On the floor, Grant wrestled sleep, turning from side to side, the boards creaking with his weight. He could not push the vision aside, not for all his will. Never had it been so hard to close his eyes. Two souls, one above, one below, lay wakeful in the dark. No word passed between them, yet the stream lingered in both their minds. Something had stirred, faint but certain, like a seed breaking through hard, barren ground. Day by day, the small log cabin began to change in ways even Grant had not foreseen. Selina's presence left its mark in every corner. The warm smell of baking rising from the hearth, neat rows of vegetables sprouting behind the porch, and the soft clucking of hens in a pen she had coaxed into life. A house once built for silence now carried, from time to time, the shy ring of her laughter, brief, awkward, yet bright as morning. Grant often stood on the porch at sunrise, a cup of coffee in hand, listening to her hum a clumsy tune in the kitchen. It had been years since the place breathed like a true home. He never spoke of it, but he knew. It was Selina who had rekindled a fire he thought long gone. One day, he rode to town for supplies. The errand carried him through the hours until the valley was dipped in dusk. His horse steamed with sweat, and his shirt clung damp to his back. As his boots struck the porch, Selina came running, holding out a cup of cool water and a clean cloth. "You must be thirsty," she said, her voice softened by the wind. Grant said nothing, only reached for it. He tipped his head, drinking deep, the cords of his throat standing beneath sun-dark skin. Beads of sweat trailed from temple to collar, gleaming under the fading light. Selina stood close, her eyes caught on the rugged strength of him. Coarse, unpolished, yet stirring something that tightened her breath. When the cup was empty, Grant lowered his arm. Selina's fingers clenched around the cloth. Before thought could stop her, she lifted it and pressed it to his neck, wiping away what the water had missed. The moment her hand touched skin, she realized she had crossed a line. Grant froze. His hand closed over hers, holding the cloth against him. His eyes found hers, dark and deep, his breath suddenly uneven. Selina stood still, heart pounding wild, her face burning. No word passed, only silence heavy with meaning. At last Grant released her, his voice rough. "Thank you. For the water." Selina drew her hand back, clutching the cloth to her chest, cheeks aflame. Grant turned away, fumbling with the reins, as though the task might hide what stirred in him. But between them, something small had sparked, a flame neither named, yet both felt. That night, after supper, Selina cleared the dishes in silence, though her mind lingered on the grip of his hand over hers. She lay awake long after, staring into the dark, her body still alive with the memory. On the floor, Grant too turned restless, every creak of the boards carrying his sleepless weight. All he could summon was the warmth of her hand on his neck. The cabin stood quiet as ever, yet in that hush a new rhythm had begun. It was not loud, not hurried. It burned softly, steady enough to warm two hearts that had lived too long in the cold. The storm came sudden, roaring down from the peaks like a herd of wild horses. Wind screamed through every crack in the wood, driving snow hard against the windows until the world beyond vanished in a blur of white. The trail to the valley lay buried, as though Dust Creek itself had never been. Inside the small cabin, only the fire's glow and the breath of two souls shared the space. Selina sat at the table, needle in hand, mending the worn collar and torn sleeves of Grant's shirt. Each stitch tightened the cloth, as though she were sewing closed the ragged seams of her own life. Grant sat across, a cold pipe rolling idle between his fingers. He did not smoke, only watched her hands move with quiet grace. The sight of her in the firelight, hair tied back, eyes bent in focus, changed the cabin into another world. No wind, no snow, only warmth blooming slow. "This shirt still has plenty of use," Selina murmured, her voice soft as rain on a roof. Grant's reply came low, rough. "Better than the day I bought it." The words drew her gaze up. She found his eyes fixed on her, dark and steady. Heat rose to her cheeks and she bent again to her task, but her heart had quickened its pace. By the second night, the water bucket had frozen solid. With no chance of reaching the stream, Selina had to bathe inside. Grant hung an old curtain across a corner, stoked the fire high until flames cast long shadows. The room hushed. Behind the cloth, Selina's fingers trembled as she shed the smoke-scented layers. The rustle of fabric carried through the cabin, each sound falling sharp into Grant's ears. He sat with his back against the chair, eyes pinned to the flames, throat gone dry. Firelight cast her shadow on the curtain, the line of her shoulder, the sweep of her back, the narrow curve at her waist, all drawn in fragile silhouette. Grant's hand clenched hard on his knee, knuckles pale. Fear and hunger warred inside him. Fear that one step wrong would shatter what fragile trust had grown. Hunger that he could not quiet. Selina cupped water, her skin rising gooseflesh under the chill. She bowed her head, letting the stream wash away dust, shame, the scars of years past. Yet through the cold, she felt something else. The weight of eyes upon her. Not the eyes of judgment she had borne from her husband, but eyes that saw, that reached, that honored. Her heart faltered. She knew he was trying to turn away. She knew, too, he had looked. For the first time in years, her body was not treated as blemish, but as woman. The thought left her blushing, yet warmed, as though a hidden spring had found its way through stone. The storm howled on, but the cabin held a silence charged with breath. Selina dried herself in quiet strokes, then drew on a worn nightdress. When she stepped out, Grant shifted fast, face turned, hands fumbling with the firewood, as though it required all his strength. Selina smiled faintly, clutching the damp towel to her chest. To her eyes, Grant no longer seemed only the hardened recluse, but a soul trembling for warmth, same as she. That night, she lay restless on the bed, while the wind clawed at the walls. Each gust struck the wood like a reminder of the frozen world outside. But when she thought of his eyes without scorn, her heart softened, a heat unfurling deep within. On the floor, Grant lay with his back turned, eyes wide in the dark. The shadow behind the curtain lingered clear in his mind, down to every line. He drew breath deep, but it would not fade. For the first time in 8 years of solitude, Grant Holloway knew his silence had been broken, and he no longer wished to take it back. By the third day, the storm still raged, snow thick through the pines, the wind howling as if it meant to tear the cabin apart. No road left, no sound, but the storm's cry and the fire's crackle. Selina slipped from her coat, clutching her worn nightdress, and stepped once more behind the curtain strung up days before. Steam rose from the pot, carrying the sharp, sweet scent of pine. Her shadow stretched across the cloth, fragile, slender, drawn so clear that Grant, seated nearby, could no longer hold steady. From the first splash of water, his chest had hammered. He clenched his fists, eyes fixed on the flames, his throat dry as ash. Years of silence, of cold nights with only the wind for company, rose now into a blaze he could not contain. His voice broke the stillness, low and rough, trembling from deep within. Selina, if I wished to be closer to you, would you allow it? Behind the curtain, her hand stilled, droplets falling soft to the floorboards. Her body shook, not from cold, but from those words. 10 years she had not heard a man ask. No one had ever waited for her yes. Her lips quivered, and she whispered softer than the storm outside. Yes. That single word lit fire in his chest. He rose, slow and steady, and drew the curtain aside. Firelight caught the sheen of water still clinging to her skin. She stood small, trembling, yet her eyes did not turn away. Fear lingered there, but with it a thin, shining thread of trust. Grant spoke no more. He simply drew his arms around her, pulling her against the breadth of his chest. Selina stiffened, then eased, letting his warmth close over her. She pressed her cheek to him, listening to the heavy beat of his heart, steady as a vow. "Let me kiss you," he whispered, his breath hot against her neck. She closed her eyes, gave the smallest nod. The kiss found her lips, uncertain, trembling, then deepening slow. Not hurried, not fierce, but like a long breath shared by two broken souls learning to mend. Selina shivered in his hold, but did not pull away. For the first time, she was not measured, not found lacking. In Grant's eyes, she was only a woman, whole, desired, chosen. They lay together by the fire, their shadows drawn long upon the wall. Grant moved with patience, gentleness, as though each touch might break her. He traced the places she thought no hand would ever seek again. Selina yielded, offering herself with trust she had thought buried, melting into the shelter of his arms. The storm wailed on, but within the cabin there was only the rush of their breathing, the pounding of hearts that slowly quieted into peace. When the flames sank to embers, Selina lay curled against him, her cheek resting to the steady rise of his chest. Tears slipped free, but these carried no bitterness. "I have never been held like this, never been called beautiful," she whispered, voice breaking. Grant drew her closer, his tone grave like a vow carved deep into night. "You are everything. You are the one I choose." Selina closed her eyes, a faint smile breaking through her tears. Outside, the storm raged on, but within the cabin, a miracle had been written. The miracle of two forsaken souls who had found each other, and found a warmth born not of fire, but of hearts that beat as one. Dawn broke soft, its pale light slipping through the cabin's thin curtains, painting faint gold across the timber walls. Selina stirred beneath the quilt, the scent of pine resin still clinging to the fabric. For a moment she wondered if the night had only been dream. Strong arms, the long kiss, whispers that still echoed in her chest. But the bitter aroma of coffee in the air told her plain, this was no dream. This was a new day, and different. On the small table by the bed sat a steaming cup. Beneath it, a scrap of paper bore a few simple, firm words. "Cold morning. Drink, keep warm." Selina held the cup close, heat spreading through her palms, as though his very warmth lingered there. A rare smile touched her lips, startling even herself. In the kitchen, Grant bent to the fire. When Selina stepped in, hair loose from sleep, he looked up. Their eyes met, then darted away. Yet the silence between them felt changed, no longer heavy but tender. Breakfast passed in quiet more than words. Each time their eyes crossed, both turned aside, though the corners of their mouths curved despite themselves. The night had torn down the line between them. Now they faced the truth of having stepped into something new. By noon, Selina tried her hand at sweetbread. She wrestled with flour and honey, glancing often toward the yard where Grant swung the axe. When the loaf was done, the scent filled the cabin, lifting her with a shy joy. Grant came in, wiping his hands against his trousers, and sat. Selina broke off a piece, offered it carefully. "Try it. Tell me if it's any good," she said, voice uncertain. Grant met her eyes, and for the first time a glint of mischief stirred in his dark gaze. "I'll try it," he said, pausing, his voice roughening. "If it's given from your lips." The words stunned her. Heat flared in her cheeks. She bit her lip, heart racing. In his look there was no cruel jest, only raw honesty and a hunger unhidden. Selina lifted the morsel to her own mouth, letting the honey melt on her tongue. Then, with a breath of courage, she leaned toward him and placed the bread against his lips. Their breath mingled in the moment. Grant could hold no longer. His arm swept around her waist, drawing her near. His mouth claimed both the taste of honey and the shy kiss, which flared quickly into something fierce. The sweetness gave way to fire, the restraint of long years breaking open in him. Selina trembled, her hands clutching his shoulders. In his grasp, she felt both overwhelmed and alive, her heart singing in a rhythm she had never known, desired, chosen, loved. When at last they broke apart, breathless, foreheads pressed together, laughter spilled soft between them, half shy, half relieved. Selina hid her face in her hands, whispering through a quiver, "I never thought I'd see a day like this." Grant held her tighter, voice low and hoarse. And I never thought laughter would live in this house again. They stayed there in each other's arms, letting the storm outside bury the world in snow. The cabin, once a place of exile, had become a true home, the beginning of love, real and hard-won. The snow thinned, bearing the trail down into the valley. Grant readied the wagon while Selina stood on the porch, clutching her shawl tight, unease heavy in her chest. This would be her first return to any town since Dust Creek had cast her out. The ride began in silence. Wheels cut through mud, hooves striking slow and steady. Selina sat beside Grant, hands folded cold in her lap, despite the blanket covering them. Each bend of the road drew her fear closer. The stares, the whispers, the mocking laughter. She braced for their return. At the market square, the village stirred at once. All eyes turned to the stranger woman riding with Grant Holloway, the hermit of the mountain. Selina stepped down, basket in hand, her knees trembling. "That's her, the barren one," a voice hissed, sharp enough for her to hear. "And someone took her in?" another muttered. "Pity's the only reason." Each word struck like a blade. Heat rushed her face, her throat closed. Her fingers shook, nearly dropping the basket, until a broad, warm hand pressed firm to her shoulder. Grant said nothing. He stood tall, unbending, his gaze fixed forward as he walked her down the gauntlet of stairs. In that moment, Selina understood. He needed no words. His very presence, solid as a wall, shielded her from the knives of their scorn. By evening, they returned to the cabin. Selina put away supplies in silence, but the wound still bled beneath her calm. Grant watched her, wanting to speak, but held back. Some wounds must be faced by the one who carried them. After dark, the sound of hooves echoed near. A broad man with silver in his beard, coat dusted from the trail, swung down with a booming laugh. "Grant, you old hermit! How many years has it been?" Ezekiel Boone, an old companion from the frontier days. He carried a bundle of gear, filling the cabin with his laughter. Grant poured whiskey. Selina set bread on the table. Stories flowed with the drink, tales of ranges and rivers. But when the bottle ran low, Ezekiel's tongue slipped. Heard tell in Dust Creek, they shamed a barren woman, dragged her before the square. That girl was... His eyes flicked toward Selina, words faltering. She froze. Her chest clenched as memories crashed. Hammer blows, sneering faces, cruel laughter, the sentence that had driven her from her home. Grant's glass slammed to the table, the crack sharp as gunfire. His eyes darkened, his voice flat and final. "That's enough, Ezekiel." The air turned heavy. Ezekiel saw his mistake, lowered his head, silent. But the damage was done, carved fresh into Selina's eyes. Later, Ezekiel slept heavy in the guest room. Selina sat alone by the fire, fingers clutching a scarf, her body trembling. She stared into the flames, hollowed out. Grant entered, saw her small frame bowed under the weight, and fury at his own helplessness rose. He sat beside her, voice hoarse, cutting through the quiet. "Only fools can't see you." Selina looked up, her eyes glistening with disbelief. Grant's rough hand took hers, steady, certain. "They see only what you lack. But I see all you carry, strength, pride, a good heart. They are blind, Selina." "I am not." Her tears spilled, streaming hot down her cheeks. To hear her name spoken that way, to be named worthy, was a truth she had never been granted. I'm so afraid, she whispered, voice breaking. Afraid one day you'll see me as they do. Grant wasted no breath. His grip tightened. His words struck deep as iron. No, I chose you, and I'll choose you again, tomorrow, the next day, and every day after, not for what you can or cannot give, but for who you are. Selina broke then, sobbing not only from pain but from release. She leaned into his shoulder, letting it bear what she could no longer hold. Outside, the wind still raged, but in the cabin, a vow had been spoken without ceremony, a vow that steadied them both like an anchor against the storm. That night, the fire burned low, only embers flaring now and then against the dark. Selina sat in a wooden chair, hands wrapped around a cup of tea gone cold, her eyes fixed on nothing. Across from her, Grant watched in silence, the glow etching lines of thought across both their faces. At length, Selina spoke, her voice sinking low as though to hide within the wind outside. For 10 years, I've lived under the sentence others laid on me. They called me a curse, barren. Each day I carried their scorn until I began to believe it myself, that I had no worth left. Her voice cracked, the weight spilling free at last. Even the one who once swore to protect me turned his back. He stood before the crowd and shouted that I was no longer worthy. He took another, and I was cast out like something broken. Her shoulders sagged, her hands clenched white in her lap. Tears slid down to her knuckles, shining in the ember light. Grant sat still. He did not break her words, only listened, as though each one needed its place after years of silence. When her sobs caught in her throat, his voice came low, rough and slow. 8 years ago, I lost the only soul who called this place home, my wife, taken by fever. One day I heard her singing on the porch. The next, there was nothing but quiet. From then on, this cabin was no more than a shell. I lived, but I did not truly exist. His words fell heavy, like the winter wind outside. Selina lifted her gaze and found his eyes, not only the hard strength the world saw, but the hollow shadow of a man once abandoned. So, she whispered, we are both the ones left behind. Grant nodded, the corner of his mouth bending in a weary smile. He reached across, slow and steady, and took her trembling hand from her lap. His grip was firm yet gentle, as though enclosing something fragile. But from now on, he said, his voice steady as stone, I do not want you to bear it alone. Selina looked down at his hand wrapped around hers, and it was as if unseen chains on her chest began to loosen. She broke, tears streaming as her body shook. Her sobs mingled with the wind, yet within his grasp they sounded like freedom. Grant bent and pressed his lips to the back of her hand. The kiss was brief, reverent, enough to still her in place. Never before had anyone touched her so, not with claim but with honor. Her heart clenched, then burst open. For the first time, she choked through tears. I feel I am cherished as a person. Grant said nothing, only held her hand tighter, long enough for her to know that here, in this small cabin, she was no longer forsaken. Two souls, once convinced all was lost, had found one another, not to erase the past, but to shoulder it together. That afternoon, the sky thickened with cloud, and the valley dimmed. Selina had just banked the kitchen fire when the sound of hooves came sudden and urgent. She stepped onto the porch and her heart clenched at the silhouette on the saddle. Her former husband, the merchant who had cast her out, standing there as if from another life. He dismounted, cloak dusted with the road, a sweet, practiced smile trying to make the familiar. "Selina," he called, honey in his voice. "I've come to take you back. That other woman is not what I thought. She's not gentle, not as you were." I was wrong. Something tightened in Selina's chest. Had it been 10 years earlier, hope might have buckled her knees. Now his words sounded hollow, a summons that only dredged up the public shame from Dust Creek's square. "There's no place for me there anymore," she said, quiet but firm. He stepped closer and reached out. "You were my wife. I can give you more than this. Come back with me, Selina. Don't bury your life in some poor cabin, At that moment, hooves answered from the road. Grant returned, upright, the dark of his eyes hardening as he took in the scene on the porch. His glance met Selina's. No words, only a weight of silence. He walked straight into the house and did not step between them, leaving the two to face one another. Night fell. The cabin went black, but for the low fire. No one spoke. Selina moved about the kitchen. Grant sat at the table, his calloused hands folded in his lap. A restless fear uncoiled inside him. He feared losing her, the woman who had rekindled his life. Yet if she truly wished to go, he knew he had no right to hold her. Finally he spoke, his voice raw and heavy. "If you have made your choice, I will respect it. So long as you are happy." The words landed like a blow. Selina's hands trembled. A plate nearly slipped from her grasp. She turned to look at him. Steady, silent. A strength that would let go if she chose another road. She could not bear it. She ran to him and wrapped her arms around his shoulders from behind, pressing her tear-wet cheek to the smoke-scented cloth of his coat. "I am not going anywhere," she choked. "This is my home. And you are the man I choose." Grant froze. He turned, and his dark eyes blazed when he saw her face wet with tears, lips quivering. In that instant, every doubt shattered. He pulled her into his arms and kissed her, the kiss wet with tears and urgent. The first kiss was raw, then it erupted into fierce need. They kissed, as if trying to swallow one another's breath, as if to let go would make the world evaporate. Grant lifted Selina and set her on the wooden table. His hands searched, unsteady but determined. Selina surrendered everything. Her pain, her release, the love newly found, in the tightness of her hold. Their bodies tangled, a sudden blaze like the fire flaring in the hearth. When the storm of need passed, they lay side by side on the tasson floor, breaths ragged. Selina rested her head on Grant's chest and listened to his steady, urgent heartbeat. He tightened his arms and whispered, "I was nearly driven mad, thinking I'd lose you." Selina lifted her hand to his cheek. "You won't lose me. I have been left once, and I know that hurt. I will never do that to you." Grant closed his eyes and pulled her closer. Outside, the night wind still screamed through the pines, but inside the small cabin, their hearts had found their place. Fear had fallen away. Only the fierce, final choice remained, and with it a love that burned, sure and decided. That morning, snow fell soft as feathers, covering the slopes in a pure white hush. Selina wrapped a wool scarf around her shoulders and stepped from the cabin, a wooden basket in hand. Each step left a delicate print on the unbroken snow, while behind her the cabin's chimney sent up a thin curl of smoke that faded into the pale sky. Grant followed, carrying a bundle of split logs. His boots pressed deep tracks beside hers. Each time she paused, he stopped as well, standing close, steady as a shadow that would not leave. They came to a clearing where the pines bent under drifts of snow, each branch jeweled with light. Selina lifted her face, lashes catching flakes, her dark eyes calm as the valley itself. Grant watched, his heart stirring like a storm beneath the stillness. For months he had battled with doubt, whether he deserved her, whether it was selfish to hope she would tie her life to his. But that morning, with her standing before him fragile and proud, he knew silence would no longer do. Grant laid the wood down and stepped toward her. His hand trembled, not from cold, but from the weight in his chest. His voice came low and hoarse, each word sounding like an oath carved deep. Selina, not from pity, not from duty. I choose you. I choose to walk beside you to the end of the road. She froze, the basket slipping from her hands, potatoes tumbling across the snow. Tears welled without warning. After years of being named a curse, a burden, she was hearing this, clear, steady, as if it were a miracle. Grant, her voice broke, trembling. Do you truly mean it? I have nothing more to give, nothing else to offer. Grant lifted her chin, holding her gaze. You've given me more than anyone. You gave me laughter. You gave this cabin warmth. You gave me reason to keep on breathing. That is enough. More than enough, Selina's tears spilled. She nodded again and again, her shoulders shaking inside her scarf. Yes, yes, I will. Grant wasted no moment. He drew her into a kiss, long and fierce, the kind that bound promise to flesh. In the white silence of the snow, they clung to each other, breath against breath, the cold world shut out beyond their warmth. This kiss was unlike any before, tender and wild, a pledge pressed deep. Grant's arms closed around her waist, pulling her tight, afraid she might vanish with the wind. Selina's arms wrapped his neck, yielding her trembling lips to the urgency of his own. They pulled apart only to breathe, foreheads resting together, breaths mingling in the frozen air. Selina laughed softly through tears. I never thought I'd be asked beneath falling snow. Least of all by a man like you. Grant held her hands, his dark eyes lit with a rare brightness. I have no ring, no flowers, only this heart, and it will never abandon you. Her tears came fresh, but her smile outshone them. She needed nothing else. That simple vow, spoken in the endless white, was stronger than any gift. Hand in hand they turned back toward the cabin, footsteps pressed side by side into the snow. Selina glanced back once. The blank trail behind was like the past, cold, merciless, now sealed. Ahead lay only the new path, traced together with the man who had chosen her, for no reason but herself. Spring came slow but sure. Ice thinned into trickling streams, wildflowers pushed through damp earth. Inside the small cabin, Selina sat by the window, her hand resting lightly on her belly. A strange, trembling, sacred feeling was stirring within her, growing day by day. That morning, she carried the news to Grant. He was splitting wood in the yard when he saw her approach, her steps unhurried, her eyes shining with something different. She spoke no words, only placed her hand over her stomach and offered a quiet smile. Grant froze. The axe slipped from his hand into the dirt. His rough palm trembled as he laid it over hers. "Is it true?" His voice cracked, hoarse and raw. Selina nodded, tears glistening. "After 10 years of being called a curse, the Lord has finally blessed me." Grant pulled her into his arms, holding tight as though the miracle itself might vanish if he let go. His laughter broke, tangled with a choked sob. Their long night was over. A new dawn had begun. The news raced to town quicker than the spring wind. From saloon to marketplace, tongues wagged. The woman Dust Creek once cast out was carrying life. The whispers flipped like cards in a gambler's hand. So she wasn't barren after all, just slander. Then it was that merchant who failed her. He's the one lacking justice at last. He strutted all these years, and now he's the one shamed. The same voices that once cast stones now turned their knives on her former husband. Selina heard it all when she returned to town with Grant. But this time, she did not lower her head. She walked straight-backed, chin lifted, eyes fixed ahead. No explanations, no pleas. The life stirring inside her was answer enough. Grant strode beside her, steps steady as bedrock. He said nothing, but the pride in his dark gaze burned plain. His hand brushed hers, and when stray eyes lingered too long, he gripped it firm, as if to tell them this was his woman, beyond judgment, beyond reproach. From church steps to saloon porch, townsfolk's looks shifted. Some nodded in respect, others dropped their gaze in shame. But to Selina, it was nothing more than passing wind. She no longer needed their approval. What mattered was Grant at her side, and within her, a small but mighty spark of life. That evening, back at the cabin, Selina sat on the porch, hand resting once more on her belly. Spring air carried the scent of damp earth and newborn blooms. Grant sat beside her, eyes softened by the quiet strength of her posture. "Selina," his voice was low, warm. "You never had to prove a thing. To me, you were always enough." She smiled, a tear slipping free. "But to myself, this is proof. I am no longer the forsaken. I am chosen. I am blessed." Grant wrapped his arm around her shoulders, letting the spring wind and birdsong weave around them. They sat together, no more words needed. The world itself seemed to breathe new life, through the land, through the cabin, and through the very hearts that had once thought themselves broken. Spring spread green across the valley. After months of blizzard, the ground softened, ready to take new seeds. Selina bent over the small garden behind the cabin, hands stained with soil and a bright smile on her face. Each corn seed, each kernel she planted, was not only the start of a crop, but a promise of a new life. Grant sat on the porch, the chair creaking beneath his broad frame. He lit his pipe but did not draw. He only watched the woman before him, slim, hair loose to her shoulders, every gesture full of quiet pride. Once he had believed this cabin would remain an empty shell. Now, because of Selina, it lived again. Laughter, the smell of baking, hope threaded into every plank. In July, on a long, sunny day, the first cry filled the cabin. Selina, exhausted but shining, held the tiny red bundle to her chest. Grant knelt by the bed, his rough hand closing over hers. He bent and kissed her brow, voice hoarse with feeling. "We have a true family now." Selina wept, tears and smile mingling. In her arms, the baby waved a small hand. That sharp first cry became the first song of this home. After 10 years branded a curse, she heard at last the loudest, truest call of her life, her own child's cry. Grant lifted the child, hands used to axe and rein trembling as he cradled the fragile life. He looked at the infant like a treasure, and then at Selina, eyes wet. "I promise to protect you both for as long as I live." In the days that followed, the cabin filled with new sounds, weeping, soft laughter, lullabies Selina hummed through the night. Grant woke in the dark to stoke the fire, brew tea for his wife, and sit watching the two sleep. The man who once hid from the world had found cause to face it. These two small lives. Word spread through town, and people came in groups. This time there were no sneers, only nods and awkward congratulations. Selina did not need their approval, yet she walked tall, the baby in her arms, striding down the road that once cast her out. Grant walked close, his hand resting on her back like a shield that would not leave. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the ridge, the three sat on the porch. Selina held the child. Grant sat beside her, his large hand over her smaller one. The stream murmured below. The oven sent out the scent of bread. Together they made a quiet song. Selina leaned her head on Grant's shoulder and whispered, "Once I thought my life was over. It turns out that road only led me here." Grant smiled and tightened his hold. He looked toward the fading horizon, and in his heart he knew he had found something lasting. Spring spread green across the valley. After months of blizzard, the ground softened, ready to take new seeds. Selina bent over the small garden behind the cabin, hands stained with soil and a bright smile on her face. Each corn seed, each kernel she planted, was not only the start of a crop, but a promise of a new life. Grant sat on the porch, the chair creaking beneath his broad frame. He lit his pipe, but did not draw. He only watched the woman before him, slim, hair loose to her shoulders, every gesture full of quiet pride. Once he had believed this cabin would remain an empty shell. Now, because of Selina, it lived again. Laughter, the smell of baking, hope threaded into every plank. In July, on a long sunny day, the first cry filled the cabin. Selina, exhausted but shining, held the tiny red bundle to her chest. Grant knelt by the bed, his rough hand closing over hers. He bent and kissed her brow, voice hoarse with feeling. "We have a true family now." Selina wept, tears and smile mingling. In her arms, the baby waved a small hand. That sharp first cry became the first song of this home. After 10 years branded a curse, she heard at last the loudest, truest call of her life, her own child's cry. Grant lifted the child, hands used to axe and rein trembling as he cradled the fragile life. He looked at the infant like a treasure, and then at Selina, eyes wet. "I promise to protect you both for as long as I live." In the days that followed, the cabin filled with new sounds, weeping, soft laughter, lullabies. Selina hummed through the night. Grant woke in the dark to stoke the fire, brew tea for his wife, and sit watching the two sleep. The man who once hid from the world had found cause to face it. These two small lives. Word spread through town and people came in groups. This time there were no sneers, only nods and awkward congratulations. Selina did not need their approval, yet she walked tall, the baby in her arms, striding down the road that once cast her out. Grant walked close, his hand resting on her back, like a shield that would not leave. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the ridge, the three sat on the porch. Selina held the child. Grant sat beside her, his large hand over her smaller one. The stream murmured below. The oven sent out the scent of bread. Together they made a quiet song. Selina leaned her head on Grant's shoulder and whispered, "Once I thought my life was over. It turns out that road only led me here." Grant smiled and tightened his hold. He looked toward the fading horizon, and in his heart he knew he had found something lasting. 2 years slipped by like a brief dream. That spring, on the porch of the cabin, Selina watched her little boy dart across the garden, tiny feet stamping marks into the green carpet. Her hand rested on her belly, where another life was quietly growing. This time there was no fear, only peace from Xiu, for she knew she was not alone anymore. Grant sat nearby, planing down fresh boards to build a second cradle. At every stroke he glanced toward Selina, lips curving slightly. The woman once branded a curse now shone like land reborn after rain. And he, the hermit who thought his days were done, now had a family to guard. On market day, the air was not as it once had been. Selina wore a pale blue dress, her hand holding her son's, her belly round. Grant walked beside her, his stride steady, a shield against the wind. The clang of horseshoes and chatter of the square no longer made her shrink back. She walked tall, eyes bright, showing the town she had been chosen and was living whole. Those same eyes that once cut her down now softened with respect. A vendor tucked extra greens into her basket. Another offered smiles. An old woman touched her shoulder and whispered, "God bless you and your family." Selina smiled, squeezing her son's hand. After years of scorn, the town at last spoke words of blessing. But across the square, a shadow rose from a saloon. Her former husband, gaunt, hair unkempt. The woman who once replaced Selina was gone, leaving only a weary merchant. His eyes met hers. In a flash, the memory of Dust Creek struck, his voice declaring her a curse before the whole town. Yet today he dropped his gaze, too shamed for words. He melted into the crowd. Grant's eyes flicked over him, then away. He placed a hand on Selina's back, guiding wife and child forward. Selina drew a deep breath and lifted her chin higher. No reply was needed. Her growing child and her steadfast family were answer enough. That evening, with their wagon full of baby things, they stopped at the stream, the very place they'd first met. Selina stepped down, her dress brushing damp grass. Their son laughed, splashing water with his small hands. She settled near the bank, her palm over her belly, eyes deep and dark in the gold of dusk. Grant came behind, arms circling her, chin resting on her shoulder. "Do you remember?" he murmured. "We first met here." Selina nodded, smiling faintly. "Back then I had nothing but an old satchel and a heart full of scars. If someone had told me I'd be here 2 years later, with a husband, with a child, I would never have believed." Grant's grip tightened. Their little boy climbed onto their laps, babbling half-formed words. Selina held him close. Grant gathered them both. The stream whispered. Spring grass scented the air, and their son's laughter rang like a hymn. As the sun slid behind the mountains, the three remained by the stream. Selina pressed her cheek to Grant's shoulder, her son in her arms, her belly stirring beneath her dress. In that moment, she knew she held everything: a home, a man who had chosen her, and a future swelling within. Dust Creek was gone. The sentence of barrenness, the years of disdain, gone. Only love and laughter filled the present. Perhaps when we hear their tale, many of us, especially those who've lived long, see a piece of ourselves in Selina and Grant. Not all have been called a curse. Not all have lost a spouse. But most know what it is to be abandoned, belittled, or to sit too long with emptiness. That is why their journey moves us. They were not flawless or rich. Selina was a woman the world had marked worthless. Grant, an aging recluse in the timber. Yet in the frozen silence, they found one another. The miracle was not a newborn child, nor the town's change of heart, but the moment two broken hearts chose to see worth in each other. Maybe that is the warmest truth. No matter how cruel the past, if even one soul will see us without judgment, we can begin again. Now, as this story closes, we still hear the murmur of the stream where once strangers sat, now joined by their son and the life yet unborn. A family built not on perfection, but on faith and daily choice. And perhaps you too, listening here, will smile to know happiness can still return. Late maybe, but bright enough to warm the years ahead. So tell us, what makes a home endure? The promises at the start, or the choice to hold fast each day through every storm? Share your thoughts below. We long to hear your stories. If this tale gave you a measure of peace or hope, please like, subscribe, and share it with those of your own years. Your comments are the fire that keeps Wild West love stories burning. So each week we may gather again, take our tea, and step into a new journey. Thank you for listening to the very end. May health and peace be yours, and may each of us, like Selina and Grant, find a place to call home.